Ladies and gentlemen, coming soon, a podcast you've all been waiting for. The Movie Podcast to end all movie podcasts. A podcast that discusses and critiques the best of the best and the worst of the worst movies playing at a theater near you. With a host whose opinions have been deemed as fact by your favorite fact checkers. And that's a fact. Without further ado, let me introduce you to the movie maestro, the tyrant of theater, the gumshoe of review, the man that makes theater employees and Hollywood execs shiver by his mere presence. Ladies and gentlemen, the judge, the jury, the sultan of cinema, Justin Henson. Welcome to the Movie Wire.
And welcome to the Movie Wire. I'm your host, Justin Henson, and we are back at the movies after the Henson household being on quarantine, which if you haven't yet, check out. Make sure you take a listen to last week's episode where you can find my reviews for 4 brand new movies you can stream right now. Also just released today to buy on streaming platforms is Jurassic World Dominion, The Amazing Black Phone, and Bob's Burgers, the movie. You can check all those reviews out of my previous episodes. And lastly, before we begin, if you haven't checked it out yet, make sure you tune into episode 23 of the Cultworthy Classic Where I join host Antonio as we discuss one of the greatest comedies of all time, and that is the Mel Brooks classic, The Producers. You can find the link in the episode bio. It is an amazing episode that was a lot of fun to do, and I hope you enjoy. Now this week on the Movie Wire, we will be reviewing 4 brand new films. The God of Thunder is back in Marvel's Thor, Love and Thunder. Mr. Malcom has a list and he doesn't check it twice in Mr. Malcolm's list. New to stream on Netflix is a new found footage film, Incantation, and those oversized Twinkies are back in Minions, The Rise of Gru. Ready for my verdict? Let's get into it.
There's a maniac who seeks to end us all. I'm putting together the greatest team ever.
Are you packed? Yes.
We've got Korg.
He's my best friend.
Yes. There's my ex-girlfriend Jane. Valkyrie.
This is the best day of my life!
The Guardians.
And giant goats.
Oh, look at those. They are wonderful.
Yes, they are. They also scream quite a lot.
You said this would be a relaxing holiday.
I said it was going to be like a relaxing holiday.
The God of Thunder is back in Thor, Love and Thunder. The Thor films have had quite a journey and evolution to them, with Love and Thunder marking number 4 in the franchise, and a lot to look forward to since the successful drastic change in tone from its previous films, like Thor Ragnarok, and with the return of Natalie Portman as Jane Foster. Marvel has had a hit or miss when it comes to their new phase of Marvel movies, with Shang-Chi, Black Widow, Spider-Man No Way Home, The Eternals, and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. It almost feels like we're in a transition stage as we wait to see what Marvel does. Is it a phase where we just introduce characters and there is nothing we're building up to? The last few Marvel movies, with the exception of Spider-Man and Shang-Chi, has had me scratching my head. There has been something missing. I have been thinking on where Marvel is going to go with these characters. Knowing Marvel, we know they have a plan, but at the same time, given the material they're putting out lately, I don't know if it's going to have the same fan magic as we saw in the Avengers. After viewing Thor, Love and Thunder, I got flashbacks of the direction of the original Batman films, where you can see the warning signs of where the franchise was going, especially with high stakes, high expectation films. Whenever there is a dump truck of money at stake and pressure from the studio, that's where films run into danger of studio meddling. I'm afraid that's what we're starting to see with Marvel films now. Marvel has done a great job in the past taking successful movies and giving more money to the sequels to give us something bigger. But unlike most sequels, they don't just amplify what people liked in the previous films, they made it make sense and gave something to look forward to for the next future films. The filmmakers didn't go full Michael Bay on us, which I can appreciate. Reviewing a Marvel film, viewing it completely different aspects as other films, but at the same time treating it as a normal film and asking myself the question, did I enjoy walking out of the theater? Many have argued that Marvel films are just fluff-bloated, mindless cash grabs, and to an extent, yes. But there is a lot to appreciate when going to a Marvel film. Marvel films had the opportunity to open up civil debates, create family experiences at the cinema, and grab a big tub of buttery popcorn and just enjoy. Are they works of art? No. but they do add some value in our culture and in ways inspire the younger generation to love film and to love the film-going experience. But at the same time, we are starting to see more and more of these in theaters and less independent films or smaller films that I have reviewed on this show in the past that deserve a good watch on a big screen. This makes me nervous for one main reason: that the studios are going to be forced to rush products to theaters, mainly because of the pandemic. There was a healthier mix of what we go to the theater to see each week. Now there's maybe 1 to 2 movies that gets released each week if we're lucky. So studios are going to have to fill seats each week with a limited amount of movies, but say what you will about Marvel movies, and what kind of brought this up is there's a scene in Mr. Holland's Opus starring Richard Dreyfuss, who plays a music teacher in the 60s. He decides to teach his music class rock and roll. Holland ends up with complaints from parents on teaching rock and roll, and Holland ends up in the principal office to explain the principal, played by Olympia Dukakis, why. Mr. Holland sticks to his guns on teaching rock and roll. Then Dukakis asks Mr. Holland, "Then what do you want me to tell the parents?" A stern Holland replies with, "Mrs. Jacobs, you tell them that I'm teaching music and that I will use anything from Beethoven to Billie Holiday to rock and roll if I think it'll help me teach a student to love music." This is true in filmmaking as well. Now, with that read, let's get into the review. The film follows up on Thor, played by Chris Hemsworth, after he joined the crew of Guardians of the Galaxy, where Thor's retirement is interrupted by a new villain, Gorr, played by Christian Bale, who is set out to ensure the extinction of gods. To help battle the threat, Thor enlists the help of King Valkyrie, Korg, and his ex-girlfriend Jane Foster, played by returning Natalie Portman, whom has taken up some Thor powers of herself by wielding the original hammer held by Thor. Together they embark on a journey to uncover the mystery of Gorr, the God Butcher, and stop him before it's too late. Thor Ragnarok was a fun ride at the movies. It had a complete rehaul after the second installment of The Dark World. It stepped away from its normal tone and went to something lighter, humorous, and engaging for audiences. The film brings back director Taika Waititi, who obviously a talented director. There's a lot to like about his style in regards to the fact he caters to the audience, but at the same time doesn't always respect the material that he's handed. What Waititi had on his side in Ragnarok was a writing team of 3 writers with experience and, more importantly, Marvel experience, who includes Eric Pearson, Craig Kyle, and Christopher Yost. He had the talent to deliver one of the most important aspects and complexity to a Marvel film. Love and Thunder is an example of overconfidence. They had the return of their director, Waititi, outstanding actor Christian Bale as the villain. Natalie Portman returns as well. This has a lot to add up to overconfidence and a lot of good things in the mix. The director from Waititi was okay. The performances were okay, with a special nod to Christian Bale, but I'll get into that a little bit later. So what could possibly go wrong with this film with such a tremendous cast? Of course, the most important thing in a movie is the writing. The writing team shrunk in this film from 3 down to 1. Jennifer Caton Robinson, who honestly I have never heard of, so I had to look her up. I haven't heard of her because she's only had 2 writing credits in 3 years and in her career other than a TV project, and both were straight to streaming. Somebody must have owed a big favor to somebody to get her this gig. The writing is noticeably amateurish and basic in this film. The story is solid in the Marvel world, which Waititi wrote, but I think Robinson was out of her element in this film. You can see little sparks of potential in her writing in the second half of the film, but then counteract that with other issues that never seem to balance out. The first half of the film acts as a parody of itself. It slaps on the humor, and some of it works when it has supporting things or characters to support it, such as humorous goats, the Guardians of the Galaxy, to help support some of the humor or some of the situations that happen to the characters. But when the characters are having one-on-one conversations, the humor falls flat. Now, there is a decent amount of things to like about Love and Thunder, don't get me wrong. This includes a couple of good performances by, of course, Natalie Portman, Tessa Thompson as King Valkyrie, and, of course, Christian Bale. Now, Christian Bale was a complete surprise to me that he would take part in a Marvel movie, given his history and rumors of being controlling on the set, and the select roles he picks. He's very particular in what he actually adds to his resume. I couldn't imagine him playing a Marvel character with Marvel executives behind the wheel, but he gives it his all in the role of Gorr the Butcher. His performance makes the audience wonder what we should think of him without having the movie decide for us. It's a shame that his performance is wasted in this film, due to the fact he has very little screen time, and to truly discover him or find out his true threat as he's called the God Butcher, which is a terrifying, threatening name by itself, which was a big disappointment because this is one of the rare villains in the Marvel movies that was actually interesting, and I wanted to know more about him and see more of what makes him tick. Chris Hemsworth's performance is, well, Chris Hemsworth doing his thing. He is a very likable actor. He has a likability complex that he just owns, but he is starting to play the same character in everything he does with the same acting style. His performance in this reminded me of the character Kevin in the 2016 Ghostbusters that he played, in which he played a dumb assistant. He is starting to lose his motivation of his character from the first Thor. He's becoming more and more dumb, especially with his ex-girlfriend Jane Foster appears, and he's reunited with Thor. There's no emotional attachment to their chemistry, all the way leading throughout the film. We just don't care. I'm not to say that's Hemsworth's fault, but a combo of writing and his performance is the true result of this lack of chemistry. The film's stronger half, its second half, where Waititi shows off his directing skills, and there's a lot of good style, where I even had to think to myself, that looks really cool. There's a lot here to make Thor a normal Marvel spectacle, but for every positive thing, there is a stronger disappointment in this film, and the ending result doesn't make it a good payoff for Marvel fans. But it does entertain okay, it's an okay time at the movies. It does have a good story and some clever plot points, but the writing holds it back. The performances are solid for the most part, but the solid performers we don't get to spend a lot of time with the exception of Natalie Portman. The art direction is colorful and bright and pleasing to the eye, but times it can go a little cartoonish and artificial, such as Thor's suit or Zeus's lightning bolt. The film tries to recreate the success from Ragnarok by doubling down and unfortunately ends up unfulfilling. But people are still going to see it. It's a Marvel movie and it's become the new social event or family event for theaters. And it's not a horrible movie, but it's not a very good one either. A word of caution to Marvel. The Thor films went from the darker tone to now this. And we had some good luck with Ragnarok. But again, word of warning, there is a franchise that went this route. The movie Batman Forever kept popping in my head while watching this film. And then we got Batman and Robin. That's all I'll say. And now I await the next Marvel film. I'm giving Thor Love and Thunder 2 stars.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It gets so hard to keep track and even have time to read all the trending topics on the web. Now there's a new app to help with all of those problems. Newsly is an audio app for iOS and Android. It picks up web articles about the most trending topics on the web at any given moment and reads them to you in a natural human voice. For the first time in the history of the internet, the entire web becomes listenable. Browse articles from topics you choose and start playing. You can follow any topic as specific as you like, from sports, science, to Bitcoin. You can even follow Kardashian. It will find you the latest articles and read them to you out loud. And guess what? They have podcasts as well. Explore trending podcasts from over 50 countries. The Movie Wire is now a featured podcast on the Newsly app. Download and use Newsly for free now. The link will be in the description of this episode. You can also use one of my promo codes that you will find in the description as well to get you a 1-month free premium subscription. Stop scrolling, start listening, download Newsly today.
Miss Dalton, 'tis common knowledge you have been cast into this world without fortune or prospects. It is my desire to have you as my wife.
I am greatly honored by your offer, but I cannot accept.
This offer will not be extended a second time.
Third, actually.
Out of my way, idiot geese!
My dearest Selina, will you come visit me in London? I promise you will be well entertained. I need your assistance. There is a gentleman, Mr. Malcom. He humiliated me. No. I then found out he had a list.
You have a list of qualifications for a bride?
I would love for Mr. Malcom to receive the comeuppance he deserves. Plus, it could be rather fun. If we present you as the perfect woman, then he discovers he does not meet the requirements on your list. That would be a perfect sort of poetic justice.
Mr. Malcom, there's someone I want to introduce you to, Miss Selina Dalton.
I'm very pleased to make your acquaintance. Perhaps you might join me for a tour of the picture gallery.
Most certainly have a reputation.
Is that the famous Mr. Malcom? Do you know him?
And you believe this description of me?
He was very impressed by her wit and humor.
I must be nearsighted.
May I assist?
Selina, it is working.
Why did you come to London, Miss Dalton?
Because I was lonely.
I was lonely too before you came.
Your list is a shield. You did not want to give your heart to a woman unworthy. It
gives us hope, and hope is a good thing.
Perhaps I am mistaken in thinking hope a useless thing.
You're being blinded by his intelligent conversation and devastatingly handsome good looks. What?
You thought to humiliate Malcolm, and you end up presenting him with the perfect wife, and that must sting.
Wish me luck, old boy.
I don't think you'll meet it.
It is time to show Malcolm your list.
I do not think Mr. Malcolm is the man you think he is.
Seems you have been deceiving me from the beginning.
Love cannot be planned so carefully. It will stir things up a bit. That is part of its charm.
My biggest weakness in comedy movies is a multiple situation comedy or chaotic comedy. From Noises Off from Sylvester Stallone's 1991 film Oscar to Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau's Out to Sea, the situation or chaotic comedies are not necessarily good movies that I've just listed, but they are comedies that I tend to go to as a guilty pleasure that I just love. There's a lot to hate about those different movies, but for some reason they just resonate with me. Right from the beginning of the opening credits of Mr. Malcolm's List were the overture of Figaro Caventina, which has been used in many chaotic romantic comedies or just comedy movies in general. It sets the tone of the film and what I'm about to see, and usually my eyes light up when I hear that song play. And there is nothing that gets me hooked in a movie than listening to Figaro Caventina to kick off a good comedy. Jerry Malcolm, played by Sope Deriso, is searching for a wife. But not just any wife. As a target of matchmaking mothers and single ladies, he's determined to avoid the fortune hunters and find a near-perfect woman. One who will meet the qualifications on his well-crafted list, but after courting Julia, played by Zaw Ashton, to the opera for one date and not pursuing her after, Julia enlists Selena Dalton, played by Frida Pinto, to teach him a lesson, but things don't go according to plan. Mr. Malcolm's List is another reason these movies are meant for the big screen, not just big blockbusters. There is so much to miss on a smaller screen from this film, from the simple changes in the dialogue to the subtle reaction throughout the movie from the entire cast that helps elevate the emotional impact from the film. When people look to the respected apps to find what showtimes, what movie to see, it's easy to miss Mr. Malcolm's List when it sits next to such films as Thor: Love and Thunder, Minions, Top Gun, and Jurassic World Dominion. Some will say, I'll wait for it to stream, or I might not be interested at all. This would be a disappointment for both decisions. This is one of those films that deserves the audience's full attention, and one that would think shouldn't be on the big screen, but they would be wrong. The film is a prime example of why film is so important, big film or small film, to have a chance on the big screen. It is so easy to miss some small details that actually enhance the experience and appreciation of a story. The film is packed full of small details that you just can't get from an experience at home. The film has a Shakespearean-like plot that is unique but simple at the same time. It has some risk that if the writing and the characters aren't likable, the film would fall flat on its face. The film's dialogue is Old English, but at the same time, during its important line deliveries, they make some current dialogue changes that doesn't seem so old school, so the audience can fully understand. Whether this was intentional or not, it doesn't matter, because it works. And it isn't unrealistic to the point where it ruins the period feel of the film. The film doesn't go for accuracy, that is obvious from the start. The film's intent is almost like a clever romance novel or a fantasy. Its intent is to take the audience away on an escape to its own rules. The first couple of acts spend its time to ensure that all the characters are well established with the audience before taking its first step into the conflict of the story. And this is where the smart dialogue comes to play. The performances are subtle and not screen-stealing, as we tend to see in a lot of period pieces. Each performance is well balanced to work in unison with each other, especially with Oliver Jackson Cohen, who plays Mr. Malcolm's friend Lord Cassidy, whose character is caught in between Mr. Malcolm's friendship and his commitment to his cousin Julia. This is a character that can easily have been overly done as a comedy or cynical, or even just downright unlikable. The writers, and thanks to the great performance by Cohen, make him the most likable character of the film, with the body language when not speaking to his tone when delivering his lines that is filled with the utmost empathy. He connects with the audience in a very unique way. When it comes to Mr. Malcolm's character, Deriso's character is an interesting one. He stays almost a backdrop and a plot driver to the other characters. Here he gives a subtle performance that leaves a lot of his intent up to the audience and doesn't give too much away. In the film, he is portrayed by the other characters as what we would call a player. but the film leads the audience to own its own decision on his intent for a majority of the film. The final act of the film is what holds the movie back from complete greatness. The filmmakers add a predictable, added conflict that almost takes away from the warm-hearted intent of the film. And this could have worked, but the film rushed this scene and it doesn't match the pacing of the actual movie. It almost gave me a, wait, what just happened moment? And the film doesn't really recover from this, except for a scene where the main characters are together for the last time, where it gives the audience one final, moment. The final act of the film is by far the weakest, but no means ruins the film. It's just unfortunate that the filmmakers had a cliche plot that you would see something almost in a generic teen romance film, and made it into something old but fresh and an absolute crowd pleaser, but it's kind of thrown off by the last bit of the movie. The film does have other flaws with the exception of the final act. The use of its settings is drastically underused and sometimes feels rushed. There is a lot of these set designs that really work well. I found myself thinking, oh man, let me look at that again. Let me take a closer look, and I never get it. The film utilizes a lot of close-up shots, but could have used a lot more shots to include the setting and a lot more to give the audience a feel of being there. And the emotional impact of the topic of heartbreak, deception, and not feeling love is sadly missed, especially from Mr. Malcom's character. I wish they would have explored more, or written a better dialogue for the character, explaining to give the audience more of an emotional attachment to some of the characters. That surprises me with all the clever writing they had in this film. They missed the most important elements of build-up towards the end of the film. Now, the movie, it is a good escape into the world of a good story that at times are predictable, but every character on screen is an absolute joy to watch, from the main character all the way to the silent servants. The film knows exactly what it is, and it doesn't pretend to be something that it's not. The film takes the audience on a pleasant journey with them, with smart dialogue structure, and a rare form that every character on screen is likable, even the ones that we're supposed not to like. This is one of the smartest period romances that will surely entertain many audiences, and I implore everybody to catch it on the big screen as soon as they can, to completely enjoy the period sets, the body language, and to ensure your eyes stay solely on the screen. The danger in watching a film like this at home on streaming is that we get the temptation to look at our phones, look at distractions, and we miss the most important, fun pieces of a film like this. I urge everybody to go see Mr. Malcolm's List. I'm giving it 3 stars.
Hey y'all, this is Karen Devaney from the Sugar Coated Murder Podcast. Join me and my sister Ann Garner for a new true crime experience. If you are obsessed with cooking shows and have a curious passion for murder cases, then find us on any of your favorite listening apps. Stay sweet.
Good night. Good night.
Yes. Good night.
Good night.
No! Minions! There are a lot of other villains in the world, but I am going to be a super villain.
This world is mine for the taking. Make me king as we move toward a new world order.
This puny little child thinks he can be a villain.
I am pretty despicable.
You better look.
Alright, I'm not Minnie. Please stop calling me that.
Minnie
My minions will say
I am a master of Kung Fu.
Teach-nous Kung Fu pour smoochy.
So here I go, it's my shot.
Now you.
This may be the only opportunity that I got.
I'm not.
You only get one shot.
The cute, funny-looking Twinkies are back in Minions: The Rise of Gru. It's the second in the Minion series and the 5th in the Despicable Me series, where we find young Gru living in the suburbs in the 1970s. And when most kids are giddy over superheroes and sports heroes, Gru is a fanboy of a supervillain supergroup known as the Vicious Six. Gru's dream comes true when he is granted an interview to join the team, only to be turned away until he can prove himself evil enough. Gru gets an idea that gets him into trouble with the Vicious Six and must rely on his trusty minions, including Kevin, Stuart, and Bob, and of course Otto for a mission they are of course not ready for. The Despicable Me series has been a consistent one with the exception of the original Minions film. Here are the creators that learned from their mistakes. The original Minions movie had its moments but relied too much on these yellow fellows to carry the movie for an hour and a half, and it made the film a little tiresome, which was a missed opportunity to integrate some intelligent humor from silent films from the early 1920s or really use the co-characters to really boost the humor of the characters. The original Despicable Me was full of humor and heart which audiences ate up, and it was also a good animated film. Now we have Gru back with his trusty minions after a short absence to do a prequel. The film brings back Steve Carell as Gru, but also has some very brilliant supporting cast choices, especially in the Vicious Six, which is brilliantly cast, including Alan Arkin as Wild Knuckles, Taraji P. Henson as Bell Bottom, Jean-Claude Van Damme as Jean-Claude, and Dolph Lundgren as Vengeance, Danny Trejo as Stronghold, and Lucy Lawless as Nunchuck. The casting in this animated film is packed with familiar voices that is just great, fun, and smart. To have over-the-top villains, why not hire over-the-top action stars from the 80s and 90s? This is where the first film took itself too seriously by hiring voices which were meant to surely fill theater seats. With a voice like Sandra Bullock and Michael Keaton, who both did a fine job, but just didn't add anything memorable to the voices. The film also learns to hire writers that understood both kids' attention spans and adults. The film was written by Matthew Fogel, who has written the script to the animated Super Mario movie starring Chris Pratt that's in production as of right now. The writing is pretty balanced when it comes to involvement of the minions and actual speaking characters, but there is a lack of opportunity of physical comedy that can be taken a little further to entertain adults. The minions' humor is mainly targeted towards kids, as it should be, and while the adult humor minions, it's mostly targeted towards the interaction with adults that give the adults most of the laughs. There is no reason you can't have Minions humor for both kids and adults. That's not to say I didn't chuckle at some of the jokes that were targeted towards kids. I did. But the point I'm making when making a film like this, an animated feature surrounding these yellow things that don't talk, why not just take out and dust off some lessons from the old comedy sketchbook to take it from a simple chuckle to a big belly laugh? During a family film like this, I tend to sit towards the back so I can see the reaction from kids and adults. And I have to say, this is one of the most impressive animated films I have been to. The theater was packed with kids, with only a few seats here and there available, and every child was entertained by this film. I think it holds a record for the number of kids leaving the theater with parents for the least amount of kids leaving. Everybody in the theater seemed to be having a good time. The film, other than my simple nitpicks of woulda, coulda, shoulda, the film is a good entry into the franchise. It does bring back a little bit of heart to it that the franchise has been lacking. Not as close to the original, but just enough to make this film more memorable than some of the sequels. What makes Minions: The Rise of Gru a successful animated feature is that it's not hyperactive for the entire runtime and it's not in your face. It takes its time to build the relationships and still be entertaining to watch. It adds a level of sweetness without giving you a cavity, which is a perfect formula for kids and adults to enjoy. The filmmakers really captured the audience on what humor and content they put in, and it's a very nice balance. The biggest drawback from the film is that it draws to conclude a message, but it doesn't make it clear and it doesn't stay with us. It's a subtle message that isn't clear by the end of the film. It isn't spelled out like most animated film. Most of the film's energy is put into its pacing and trying to keep the runtime around 90 minutes, and this is another miss for the film. If it's an animated film, children should take something away that's a clear, positive message, or at least have, an absolutely clear message by the end of the film. If you don't have that, then it's just a 2-hour waste of time for families, or they're going to take something away that is just fart jokes, yellow butts multiple times, and wisecracks. But end of the day, the film is better than the first Minions film. It's smarter, it's innocent, it's memorable, it's likable characters that is enjoyable both for kids and adults, and I'm sure it will be played over and over and over again in your home when it's available on streaming. The film by no means is an animated classic, but it hits all the boxes and it's a fun time for your family at the movies. I'm giving Minions: The Rise of Gru 3 stars. And now we welcome the harshest critic of them all. I want to say welcome back to my daughter, Brooklyn. Brooklyn, I can't wait. Again, we haven't discussed the movie. We always have our dialogues at the podcast and after the show. So I am absolutely dying to hear your take on Minions: The Rise of Gru.
Hello, people.
Hello, Brooklyn. Welcome back. So I am absolutely curious what you thought of Minions: The Rise of Gru. So you heard my opinion.
Yep.
And again, we don't discuss movies until the podcast. And then after the podcast, we get into a deep dive between you and me and we talk about things we like. But why don't you tell the listeners exactly what you thought of Minions: The Rise of Gru?
Well, I thought the movie's supposed to be for children, like age like 6 or 7, right? But it was kind of more like 7 to 5, and I also thought it was like for more like year-olds too, because it was kind of like babyish, but also kind of teenage-ish mixed. Because it kind of has some jokes, and it was pretty good. I mean, I wouldn't call it the best. Like you said, it was better than the first in all those movies, but
I thought it was better than the first Minions. I still like the Despicable Me series a little bit better.
Me too.
So did you, compared to the first Minions, which one did you like better?
Oh, I don't really remember the first.
I think that's a sign.
Yeah, it is.
So I like how you put an age on it. How old are you, Brooklyn? Tell the
I'm
listeners.
11.
11. So would you recommend this for 11 to, say, 13-year-olds?
It depends what you like. If you're like a girl or boy that likes like cheery and exciting stuff, you'll probably like this. If you're just kind of like me, you're probably going to be like, okay, this is okay. And then if you're like people who hate cheery stuff, like 100%, you're definitely not going to like this. You could just walk out of the movie theater and change your mind.
Okay. I like that. I mean, I think that's the most honest review you've given a movie. Now, it is a little sweeter than the
100%.
previous one. But to me, I think I like that a little bit more. It adds a little bit more emotion. And I don't know if that's just the adult factor that they put into it. It might not be targeted more towards like the preteen teens like yourself.
Yes.
You think it's more for little kids.
Yes.
Right?
Obvious.
And I think the theater that the movie showing we went to had a majority of little kids.
Oh, yeah. Like the whole movie theater was little kids. A lot of noises too.
And I think they were having a good time, but I think you were probably one of the rare middle preteens there. So,
yeah.
And I think that was a pretty honest. So you said, what are the ages that you think people will enjoy this?
Well, like 3, 5, 6, 7. Also, like 30-year-olds might like it, like yourself.
Yeah.
20-year-olds might like it. They really like cheery stuff like that.
Okay. Anything else? What did you not like about it?
Well, I feel like it could have done a better animation. Maybe maybe the minions could have been a little darker, like from the previous movies. Like they were a little darker. And yeah.
Yeah, I think they made a little bit lighter tone on this. I think because it was a kind of a lighter.
Well, and it was 80s probably too. That's why.
It was the 70s.
Oh.
Yeah. Disco fever. You want to sport out your disco moves?
Nope.
You want to dance to a little Saturday Night Fever?
No.
No? All right. I tried. All right. So out of 4 stars, Brooklyn, what would be your rating?
2.5.
2.5? Okay. We're not too far off on that.
No.
So, okay. So, Brooklyn, what was your favorite Despicable Me movie?
It was the ones with the purple minions. I forgot what that one was called.
I think that was the third one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Me, the first Despicable Me would always be my favorite because it had the most heart from it. It had a little bit of emotion. It had a little bit of humor.
That's kind of like my third one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Brooklyn, I want to thank you yet again for giving the kid/preteen assessment of a family movie. And it's always a joy to take you to the movies and have you on the show. I appreciate your time that you spend with me.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, totally. Sure, Dad. All right. It's your bedtime. Go brush your teeth.
Okay. Sure. Oh.
Go brush your teeth right now.
Okay, bye.
All right, Brooklyn, say goodnight to everybody.
Bye.
This is how blessings work. Do you believe in such things as blessings? Say, for instance, wishing on your birthday, or wishing someone safe travels, or maybe even wishing Merry Christmas or the like. It may be just a thought, or perhaps even a reminder. The fact is, involuntarily and quite unconsciously, we believe our will can bring about good outcomes. But do you know that your will can actually change the outcome of events? Let's do an experiment now.
Incantation, here's a brand new found footage horror film from Taiwan, new and streaming on Netflix now. This is a new breed of found footage horror that tries to be unique and refresh the genre. 6 years in the past, Lee Rowan is cursed after breaking a religious taboo. Now she must protect her daughter from the consequences of her actions. With the success of movies like The Blair Witch Project, Paranormal Activity, it grew a flood of found footage movies that eventually became exhausting and repetitive and sloppy. We have kind of taken a small break from studios pushing found footage films into theaters, mainly thanks to smaller and smaller box office numbers from the Paranormal Activity franchise. That's not to say that streaming hasn't been flooded with found footage films and extremely low-budget found footage films. You do have Paranormal Activity that did have a low budget, but the difference is it executed it in a creative and thrilling way. It was a prime example of using small budgets and creative ways to make something scary. And it doesn't feel like a low-budget movie, but a film that puts the audiences in its terrifying world. A lot of straight-to-streaming found footage films have just tried to cash in on the fad, and you see a ton of them on streaming right now. Incantation is something different. The film starts off with what you would expect from a found footage film, where our main character Rowan, played by Wen Yensai, where naturally she introduces a hint of the introduction and explanation of why she has a camera. There's nothing new here in this scene. Every found footage film starts off with explaining why they have a camera in the first place. Nothing wrong with that, but Rowan explains that she has a camera to capture the reaction of her daughter Dodo as she is about to be reunited with. This is a great way that the film piques the curiosity of the audience right off the bat. But what really piques the audience's interest is the commentary before the credits. It's a commentary of illusion that kicks off the film and sucks the audience in with a pretty clever optical illusion explaining the words, "The world is as you see it." The opening scene sets the tone of the film and is explaining something very unsettling and uncomfortable, and it makes you kind of turn in your seat. It's a very brilliant way to set up the film, and it's something I haven't seen before. The first act of the film is especially eerie, and what sets it apart from other found feature films is the sound editing. That is almost in tune with your heartbeat. It's very rhythmic, and it makes the audience want to hold their breath by listening to it, with the usage of lots of low tones and bass, and matched with a very haunted-looking apartment. You take these elements, and then you add some great lighting work. The lighting work here is also spot on, and you can tell it was done with a lot of very low orange tone light that amplified upwards, added to the creepiness of the act. It is brilliantly executed and sure to give goosebumps to the audience. And the reason I bring up the brilliant film execution in the first act is because that's the most memorable in the film. The film starts to trickle downhill after the first act. It starts to add more and more things to make from what I would imagine a fresh found footage movie is, I guess, what the filmmaker's intention is, by adding more than what it's actually needed. It's like the first act got some lessons from the Paranormal Activity, and the rest of them went the path of the paranormal sequels. The lesson, which I have said before, is more doesn't mean it's better if you don't have a clear vision, and less is more as long as the vision is there. Horror in film has always been at its best when it comes to simplicity. To let the audience simmer with their imaginations, we don't need a complex story to be scary. And when you add too much, too fast of a pace, it takes away from what the main intent of the film was. And if you don't give the audience time to take it all in, you get this result, a sloppy, unrewarding, and unscary film. And I can see what the filmmakers were trying to do with an elevated horror element like Hereditary, It Comes at Night, and Goodnight Mommy, and mix it with a found footage genre. You can see sparkles of that in this film. The film could have easily been an elevated horror film if it had a vision of just dropping the found footage formula altogether. The found footage formula is unnecessary in a film like this, and as the movie moves through each act, it tends to get faster paced to add more things, and the characters just tend to get dumber. especially with their cameras. In a lot of these situations that the characters are in, anybody would question why they're holding a camera or still holding a camera. Incantation does have its moments in a film that do shine. If you are a parent, there's an amount of horror by the situation Rowan and Dodo are in. As a parent, we feel the pain when our child is hurt. We worry when our children are out. We want to do the best we can to make them safe. Incantation does something absolutely horrible, but smart at the same time to get a reaction from the audience by tuning into that feeling of pain and worry that parents feel. And it zeroes in on this and takes no prisoners. It becomes very graphic and it tears at the psyche of the parent. It's almost like a cheap shot in horror to directly go for the child aspect of it, but the film just doesn't add it just to add it. It does have merit to grow with the pain of Rowan and in the dilemma, and it adds a different sense of horror that we saw in the beginning of the film, which started off as a paranormal scare to now an internal fear of a parent being helpless. The film has its shining moments here and there with some shocking jump scares, creepy moments, but there are more moments that fall flat than actually work, which lowers the audience's confidence every time there's a scare that has been a misfire. The main thing keeping this film going is the consistent setting of the characters are in. The film moves from flashbacks to present quite often, and though distracting, it does add a nice balance to the film when it comes to intensity. The film goes from present to haunting past or vice versa. The film is an honorable attempt at almost mixing two genres, but at the same time it was a complete misfire by being a found footage film, with too much story complexity to make sense to be a found footage film. And why they went this route is beyond me. This could have been a whole different movie with a lot of cool style to it. And by the time we get to the climax, I kind of scratched my head and simply said, okay, I'm giving Incantation 2 stars. And that's a cut on this week's edition of The Movie Wire. We will be back next week with brand new movies and brand new reviews. If you haven't yet, make sure you hit follow for The Movie Wire wherever you listen to me. And don't forget to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also keep up to date with me on The Movie Wire by following me on Instagram and Twitter at Movie Wire Show. Until next week, stay for After the Credits to show support to the filmmakers that put their blood, sweat, and tears into making a feature film. And make sure you support your local movie theaters.
A verdict has been made on this episode of The Movie Wire by your host, Justin Henson. He thanks you for listening to the show. You can follow Justin on Instagram and Twitter at Movie Wire Show or visit his website, www.themoviewire.com. Oh, and don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we will see you at the movies.